This line is key to understanding Booker DeWitt. It's the key to understanding BioShock Infinite. You see, the first 15 minutes of the game don't just set the stage, they tell you the entire story. BioShock Infinite's intro is heavy-handed, it can be difficult to understand, but ultimately, it is a microcosm of BioShock Infinite's entire plot. That plot includes multiverses, exploring the idea of different universes and constants and variables, and in the case of BioShock Infinite, one concept that we have to reckon with is that Booker is not only the solution to Infinite's problems, but he is also the problem to Infinite's entire plot. Now, of course, when I first played this game, I was only 15, 14 years old. It was hard for me to follow, if I'm being honest with you, in any case. As soon as the game starts, you're in this boat with two people who just seem off. Not just because they're British, no, but because they just don't feel normal. There's something weird about them. They talk about you and they talk around you like they're at a zoo looking at an animal, like through a glass window, or like they're looking at a specimen inside of a jar. They finish each other's sentences. They seem to be so quick on the uptake. And I think the biggest red flag here is that it's fucking storming. The waves are rough, and out of all the oceanic vehicles they could have chosen, something more robust, I suppose, they chose a blood-clot rowboat. They could have sunk, you know, that's all I'm saying. It's just weird, and I think this immediately conveys to the player how this world is going to be a little bit interesting, it's going to be very different, and it's going to be very odd, to say the least. And then, as this rowing journey continues, one of the people in front of you, one of the twins, Rosalind Lutece, drops a pretty big clue, saying that this is a thought experiment.
I've made it very clear that I don't believe in the exercise.
Heroic?
No. Imagine that's wonderful exercise.
Then what?
The entire thought experiment.
And truly, I think for all intents and purposes, and probably literally, the entire plot of Infinite is a thought experiment. It's Ken Levine, the creator of BioShock, telling us directly that this isn't just a mission, it is in fact a scientific test, and Booker is the variable being measured. When they say that, no, he doesn't row, when they say that, as we play through the game, this is their 123rd experiment. And across every attempt in this experiment, Booker never rows. It's a fixed point, and I think this does a good job in setting up the game's logic and helping the player understand and kind of anchor themselves to the game, because frankly, you can get lost in understanding how the game operates in its narrative structure, because it can be, again, pretty heavy-handed. Towards the end of the boat ride, I wouldn't even call it a ride, it's just like towards the end of this boat excursion, they hand you a box, okay? And every single item inside that box is not just a tool for Booker's quote-unquote mission. Whatever is inside the box, it's all carefully chosen to elicit something out of Booker. You have a photo. He doesn't realize who this person is. It says the name Elizabeth, but he doesn't know who she is exactly. There is a key with a cage, and then if you flip it, there's a bird. It's a symbol that also relates back to Elizabeth, basically alluding to the fact that Elizabeth is a bird trapped in a cage. And then there's a code. The code says 122, right? It's an allusion, again, to how many times that they've performed the experiment thus far. So they've performed it 122 times. By the end of the boat ride, we are greeted by a lighthouse. Of course, there is always a lighthouse. And again, going back to the idea of constants and variables, the lighthouse is a constant. In every single BioShock game, there is a lighthouse, which begins to sow the idea in the mind of the player that maybe those other BioShock games are also part of different multiverses. And you could also very much just write this off as fan service, in the sense that, like, okay, you know, it's a BioShock game, we gotta put a lighthouse in there as fan service, and yeah, maybe it is. But also at the end of the day, like, if we wanna dive into BioShock Infinite's plot and try to piece things together within the confines of Infinite's plot, I also think it just makes more sense to just say that the lighthouse, of all the constants and variables in the BioShock universe, the lighthouse is a constant. This constant acts as a doorway between worlds. Going back to the fact that this is an experiment and it's something that the Lutece twins have performed time and time again, we have evidence of the fact that this isn't our first time here. This isn't the first Booker who's been here. When you go up to the door of the lighthouse, there is a note.
Excuse me.
And then as you enter the lighthouse, there is another thing that we have to note. It's a dead lighthouse keeper that it seems to have been tortured. There's a note on there that says like he is coming or something like that. At the bottom there's like a signature -C. C stands for the antagonist of the game, Comstock. Father Comstock. It's hard to say Comstock in a way that sounds like that name and not Comstock. I don't know, I just wanted to point that out. I know it's a weird one, but like I just wanted to point that out. It's hard. In any case, so the Keeper knew that Booker was coming, and in this case, I think it's only fair to really provide the theory that the Lutece twins went out of their way to kill the Lighthouse Keeper as a way to make sure that the experiment goes smoothly and well. Once we get towards the end of this lighthouse sequence, we enter the code finally, 122. And 122, of course, this isn't the last time we're going to see it. We also see it later when Booker goes through a fair and then finally meets up with the Lutece twins once again to flip a coin for the 123rd time. If you count all the tallies before the coin flip that Booker performs as we observe it, it's 122. So once again, it's very much the Lutece twins' signature, counting all of their attempts thus far. Now, we enter the Church of Columbia, and before we even get baptized, we get treated to a line that is a direct echo from the depths of Rapture, and that is, you know, is it someone new?
Is it someone new? Someone from the Sodom below, newly come to Columbia to be washed clean before our prophet, our founders, and our Lord?
I just need passage.
And in BioShock 1, that is the first line we hear from a splicer who says the same thing.
Is it someone new?
This is it someone new line. We may not realize it immediately as the player, but as you play through the game and you understand that Columbia is a failed utopia, it is a dystopia. When you realize that towards the end of the game, that is it someone new line makes more sense because it immediately connects the dystopia of Rapture to the dystopia of Columbia. Booker proceeds to deliver a very blatant piece of foreshadowing. He says,
That idiot priest needs to learn the difference between baptizing a man and drowning one.
this is perhaps the biggest irony of the game. It's also very much central to the plot of BioShock Infinite, because Booker is both Booker DeWitt and he is also Father Comstock. He is Father Comstock when he gets baptized at Wounded Knee, which is a historical event in the game that is central to Booker's development. And Booker DeWitt becomes Booker DeWitt if he chooses not to get baptized at Wounded Knee. Because Booker is both the protagonist and the antagonist, the solution presented to us in order to finally break free from this loop is, with the help of Elizabeth's powers, we go back in time to when we were given the choice to get baptized at Wounded Knee. And rather than either running away or getting baptized, we drown ourselves. And this is where Booker's line becomes so ironic, because the difference between baptizing a man and drowning one in the case of BioShock Infinite simply is just two sides of the same coin. As you finally enter Columbia after almost drowning, the game does give you one last look at Columbia before everything starts collapsing, because ultimately Columbia is a perfect world built on a lie. One clue that the game gives is the game's first anachronism, or in other words, it's like the game's first item that is out of time. It's out of its time period. The game takes place in 1912, and yet when you walk through Columbia, you encounter a barbershop quartet singing God Only Knows. I didn't know this at first. It took me, maybe, I think it was on my third playthrough, that I realized that, oh shit, God Only Knows is not from, I thought it was a very old song. I thought it was from that time period, but in fact it wasn't. God Only Knows is from 1966. and the game takes place in 1912. So there's a big discrepancy there. It's the first sort of tangible piece of proof that we get of a tear in reality. And as you play the game, you understand that tears become a very literal thing thanks to Elizabeth. She has the ability to peer through other dimensions and make them a part of the one that we play in. I just think it's a very interesting narrative treat that we get as a player. These things don't hit as hard the first time because, again, it's kind of hard for you to realize these things. When you play the game through a second time and then a third time, it kind of like compounds and you're like, oh shit, like look at all this stuff. But just to recap everything, the introduction establishes that this is an experiment, that we are in the middle of a loop, and it establishes the end of things via some pretty strong foreshadowing from Booker's lines, and also just kind of the world that we're introduced to in the beginning. BioShock Infinite's intro, to me, remains as one of the strongest introductions to a video game. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. My favorite. One of my favorite games of all time. If you have a moment from BioShock Infinite that you also really enjoyed, feel free to leave it down in the comments below. If you have a point that you liked about the introduction as well, leave it down in the comments below. And if you have theories, let me know. I would love to hear some of your theories on BioShock Infinite. In any case, if you like this video, like it. If you want to see more of this type of content, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.